Okay, so 3.19, we have the patch notes. Want to take a couple of minutes to go through old builds and kind of look at things that work, things that don't work, things that became twice as good. Somehow there's one of those, and things that got worse by more than 50%. So, yeah, it's actually kind of interesting. Let's take a look, and some of these builds are a little bit older. This is a spectre build. The idea here is that we are using the Dodri's elixir to shove charges onto discharge specters. Right, by putting these charges on discharge specters, they just run after us, and you see the colorful explosions as they blow things up. So there's a couple things that happen to this build. First of all, in the current release, charges became way more powerful. That is unfortunate. Now, to be fair, a lot of my minions didn't have charges because the ones I cared about, did all the explosions and just blew things up. The other thing is that discharge started doing 50% more damage. Now, as part of these changes, one of the things that's happened, of course, is that remove that. Is that we don't have quite as high a level of specters anymore. But getting your actual spectre gem to the level where you get the extra spectre is much easier. So it's a little hard to say how good this is or how bad this is. But because we're playing this as a Pathfinder, and because the power is getting pulled out of Necromancer and into items, it really could open up some pretty decent pathing on the tree. And this might be a really decent build at the moment. The other thing is that I'm a fan of splitting your damage across multiple elements. It's quite possible for monsters to have 85 resistances to one element, but probably not to all. So yeah, this is a fairly convenient build. Monster level 83 on this map. You're spending a little bit of time running around, but it was relatively safe, and it just worked surprisingly well. And it could be much better with the new itemizations, opening up your main hand and offhand slots, giving you lots more passive points on the tree. Very exciting for this particular build option. This honestly probably should be my league starter. I'm not sure it will be. One thing to keep in mind, you don't really league start this particular build because you definitely need the Dodri's elixirs with 3 charges each. Very important to get that. So yeah, you need some levels to get there, but by maps you can start doing this, and it worked quite well. Okay, next build. Just pause that so my computer doesn't murder itself. Yeah, this was 3.18, where we used the Beast for Charl to get to 140% of damage recouped as life, of as energy shield. Now the Beast for Charl got doubled, so this becomes 280%. The way that this build worked is we are using Storm Secret. Storm Secret hurts us. And we're using Beast for Charl plus the Maven build to get massive damage recouped as energy shield. Right? At this point you have 140%. And then to get a little bit more convenient clear, we use Embrace Madness and Plague Bringer. That's kind of memey. And honestly, with the increase of power of Beast for Charl, which is the core of our recoup mechanic, this is, just build more damage, more clusters. I think this might actually be significantly more potent. This build is also not impacted by the flash charges on being hit changes. So that makes life a little bit easier. There were definitely some clunkiness things about it, about having to get your first shock off and things like that. So maybe there's other ways to go about that in the future as well. But yeah, it does really, really good damage. And it did pretty decent. It had incredible tankiness, even though it only had like 4,000 energy shield here. And I think that with the buff to Beast for Shal, being able to double the amount of recovery that you get from it, it might not be 280%, it might be like 200% damage recoup as ES, which is still much better. This build is actually in a decent spot, so probably still good, super dependent upon uniques. Right, you really want to make sure you get a hand on your uniques beforehand. You need to pick up some storm secrets early on in the league. Everything else is pretty cheap. Oh, let's pause it. Okay, which one was this? Oh, this was Hitless. Hitless, this is abusing the flash charges gained when hit, and Hitless allowed you to do that. I'm going to explode here in a second because we encounter a Droughtbringer, and there's a whole bunch of beyonds and rares and other stuff on the screen. So to some degree, what's happening here isn't going to happen in the future. On the other hand, these flasks that you're seeing flicker there, that's gone. I think it is safe to say that this build is dead. Yeah. It wasn't that good for the investment, and Droughtbringer just killed you anyway. So, yeah. That build. Okay, Ambush Ignite. So the idea here is we used Ambush, and we combine it with Static Strike. There's a couple of things that happen when you're combining Ambush with Static Strike. It's a little bit of a clunky playstyle for a little bit until you get some increased duration. When you get some increased duration, it's very convenient. You just run around, things near you just get zapped by the Static Strike, and the Static Strike has an Ignite proliferation on it. Because one of the challenges it had is you didn't hit that many different targets. Played with a bunch of different options around here, but the Ambush, Ignite, Static Strike was a pretty potent setup, but the question became, what do we do after that? With the new skill gems that are all focused around, what do you call it? The shock effects and shock-related behaviors. I mean, Static Strike could be a really good source of shock. So maybe there's a build here now. Maybe there's something different than Static Strike into Ignite. We can use Static Strike using Ambush so that everything crits, so that everything shocks 100% of the time because everything crits. And then being able to leverage that to power some of the new skill gems. That's an option. I think this build is probably as good as last league, or 317 back in the day. Might be a little bit better with the resist changes on monsters. You definitely need a way to work around things. And yeah, one of the things that was really sad is that it didn't deal well with block. Oh well. Yep, there we die. Alright, next one. This is Flask Immortality. This is the OG. Let's just hang out and see how many things can be hitting us all at once, and it really doesn't matter because we recoup so much life whenever we're hit. This is gonna work roughly the same except for the part where you die. So yeah, this one's dead. This one is, oh, let's make sure you mute that. This one's interesting. this is Survival Secrets Discharge. So we're using Survival Secrets. We are generating a lot of flash charges because of Survival Secrets, because we are using the Doderies elixirs, and the Doderies elixirs are never in effect, right? So Survival Secrets will add more charges. Now, Survival Secrets has a reduced flash charges gained effect, which is really frustrating, except that Doderies Elixir's number of flash charges doesn't scale with a Flask effect. So this build was actually... I mean, this build should do 50% more damage, because it's a self-cast discharge. There you go. Lazy self-cast discharge. It's going to be as good or better than it was. This was 3.16 with the buffs to discharge and the resist changes. This should do more damage going forward. And yeah, if you like big discharges, this was the Pathfinder way of doing it. Again, using Doderies elixirs, which were quite potent for this particular purpose. Now, Doderies elixirs, although we pop flasks frequently, we don't pop flasks all the time, so the healing we get is not really going to be nerfed, right? Our flash charges gained, it's on the Doderies elixirs, is mainly passive and from killing monsters, so we should be in roughly the same spot. The only difference is that we're going to have to build some sort of ailment mitigation. We can't rely on the nodes we had before for ailment mitigation, which means we probably can pick up increased flash charges gained for enemies that were affected by a elemental ailment from the Ascendancy passives, and gain more flash charges that way and make it a little bit more of a smoother, clear speed way of playing. This is still relatively early in maps. I kind of got bored with it because she just ran around and played Flask Piano and blew up the whole screen at once. Yeah, not the most enjoyable playstyle, but worked quite well. Alright, so that's what we got. I'll put links to all of these different videos in the description in the order that they appear. So yeah, some builds became significantly more powerful. Some builds are dead. Yeah, they're really dead. But I think that the Pathfinder umbilical cord, flasking your minions, might be a decent way to go. I don't know. It kind of really depends on what the mods look like and how things work. And also depends on what changes they made that are not in the patch notes, right? So fingers crossed, Droughtbringer is going to work the way that they put it on their website. Probably not. It's probably still going to be the behavior that just obliterates Pathfinder ascendancies. But we'll see. It's really hard to tell right now what things are going to look like. Anyway, that's a wrap up of some of the builds that I think would be most interesting for this league. If you were to start anything, Static Strike Ambush would be my go-to. Static Strike Ambush combined with Energy Blade was one of the things that I was messing around with, and the problem I ran into was that the two-handed Energy Blade really wasn't very good. And yeah, you crit all the time, you have shocks on things all the time, but you didn't really have good things to do while you were running around and waiting for the next time you had to ambush and Static Strike. So I think that some of the new skills could, slot in there quite nicely. As far as these builds, as to whether or not you should play them as Pathfinder, this is really good as Pathfinder or as a Ascendant, because we need these flask recoveries. They're very important to get flask recoveries up. Damage recoup this energy shield. Pathfinder really doesn't offer you much here. We have the easiest time of maintaining our flasks, but that's it. Like it wasn't very Pathfindery specific in that regard. Hitless dead. Ambush ignite. I don't know if that Pathfinder really has super synergies on this at this point. I suspect they don't. There's probably other synergies that are better. Flask Immortality is dead. And Survival Secrets, Discharge. Again, Ascendant or Pathfinder, it's a toss-up. Both of them will work equally well. And yeah, there we have it.